Welcome back to our Hearts of Iron 4 video. Today, as you can tell by the title, we're going to be talking about tanks. What situations should you use them in, the pros, cons, and uses of each kind of tank in the game, how you should be using them, and a couple really cool tricks that are going to help you guys use your tanks a lot better. So before we get too far into this, I just want to bring up two things. One, on the right hand side of all these pictures, you'll have three buttons you can click and research a tank variant. The top one is a tank destroyer, second one down is a self-propelled artillery, and the third one is an SPAA, or self-propelled anti-aircraft, or as I like to call it, the aircraft gun on wheels. Then if we look over here, we have a light 1, light 2, light 3, medium 1, medium 2, medium 3, heavy 1, heavy 2, heavy 3, super heavy tank, and a modern tank. So now that you're caught up to speed, let's talk about what the difference between these tanks are, how they're good, and their uses and their cons. First off is the light tanks. Now, all the light tanks in the game are set up for the exact same goal. Pretty much, they're supposed to have high speed, they're incredibly cheap, but they have almost no armor compared to going up against anti-tank guns or other tanks, and they have, well, a pretty bad gun if we're going to be honest. Now, the reason you would probably do light tanks is for, well, actually a couple reasons. First off, they only require steel. All light tanks in this game require steel compared to medium tanks, which all require tungsten. Heavy tanks all require chrome, and the super heavy tank also requires chrome. Then a modern tank requires chrome. So it's obvious that for countries that don't want to be trading a lot of their factories away and they're not going to be going up against divisions with anti-tank guns, these would be a great idea. Not just using light tanks against infantry divisions without anti-tank guns, but another great idea is to have air superiority over the enemy and use CAS. And that way, whenever you do break through, because your speed will be such a great factor, that you'll be able to actually cause an overrun of the enemy troops, effectively wiping out the division like it was completely encircled and killed. So really, you should only use these if you have air superiority, if you have CAS, and Also, the only other time you should use them is if the enemy infantry do not have anti-tank guns. Otherwise, they will rip these things to shreds. Next up is medium tanks. Again, we're going to follow this line here, so it's going to be a little bit easier to cover. Now, for medium tanks, the pros are they have a really good gun. They have about 81 piercing, and their soft attack is 25, which is a little bit more than the light tank. Yeah, just a slight bit more. Oops, wrong tank. Than that tank down there. Second off, they have really good armor, and they still have an alright amount of speed. They have 9 kilometers per hour. However, motorized divisions have, 12 kilometers per hour. So it's going to be a little bit slower than a full motorized division. However, it's still an alright tank for speed. Next up, and probably one of the biggest factors about this, is it has 80 armor, which is very good for tanks. Their 80 armor is going to be able to deflect, I believe, a level 2 anti-tank gun. No, it can only deflect a level 1 anti-tank gun and the first anti-tank gun upgrade. But still, that is a very good option if you have the resources. The cons to those are they're very expensive for countries without any kind of tungsten. And they are slower than the light tanks, so you won't get as many overruns if you don't have CAS up. So it's kind of a 50-50 trade-off, but if you have a lot of tungsten or you're going to be able to ensure a very good access to it even during war, this will probably be a very good option for you. Their main use in this game is good for pushing, really just for pushing divisions back and causing encirclements. Not overruns, but breaking through non-guarded divisions and non-tank guarding divisions and use these guys to cause encirclements and just go out and just take out the divisions slowly. Another thing about this is these are a lot better to have CAS set up for, but if you don't have air superiority, you're probably not going to be able to expect to see any kind of overruns if you're going to use these kind of divisions. Next up is the heavy tanks, which if we go right here, which is a heavy 2. Now, the heavy 2s are actually good and bad for quite a few reasons, obviously. First off, they have amazing armor at 110. Second off, they have a great gun. They can do about 30 hard attack. They can do 111 piercing, which will decimate any kind of medium tank up until literally the 3rd tier. They still do a ton of damage. But also, you want to take into account the soft attack value, which is 27, which is not that great compared to the other tanks. Now, another great thing about heavy tanks that probably people do not know is they do, like super heavies I'll cover in a second, give bonuses for attacking forts. That is why they are called siege tanks. Somebody told me that little thing today. But basically, this tank here, which is a heavy tank, all heavy tanks give a 10% bonus for attacking enemy forts, which is great. Now, the bad side of this is they are extremely expensive. They require 3 chrome instead of the 2 tungsten, which is chrome is a lot more valuable in Hearts of Iron 4. They cost a lot more production. They are probably the second most, well actually third most production costly tank in the game. And they are extremely slow, locking in at 6 kilometers per hour. So, and actually all these stats do change between the tanks, like that one's 5, this one's 6, and that one's 6, but pretty much the idea behind the stats are about all the same. Now, because they're slow, they're extremely expensive, but they have excellent armor. They give bonuses for attacking forts for the entire division attacking, and they have a good gun along with great armor. It's best to probably put one of these tanks, if a game allows it, into a 20 width infantry division or even a 40 width, so that way you can increase the armor value of the division, requiring anti-tank guns to actually fight it. Or another option is you'll be able to, if you put really a lot of work into dedicating trying to get a 20 or 40 width heavy tank destroyer or heavy tank division with motorized instead of just doing a Space Marine kind of style template, you probably might be able to be lucky enough to get 3, 4, maybe even 8 max out in a game to be able to help you, because these do cost a lot of production and they're very expensive. So it's really best to probably make a few very small heavy tank divisions along with maybe a couple Space Marine template options, which are just infantry mixed with tanks, and these would probably work best. But mostly these are made for just almost defense, I guess, if you're going to use them on a front line in an infantry and tank kind of template, or if you're going to use them in a 40 width template, they are best for attacking enemy medium tank divisions and infantry. Now let's talk about super heavy tanks, which are probably, I mean, if we're going to be honest here, they are the second best tank in the game. Now, on a super heavy tank, they have absolutely incredible armor stats. Their armor is 145. Nothing in this game really can come close to that. So they have 145 armor, and then on top of that, they have an amazing gun. If we look at it here, we have 38 soft attack. We have piercing of 146. That can even pierce up to one of these heavy tanks, or these heavy 3 tanks, I think. Yeah, just barely be able to pierce it. But probably the best part about this tank is if you do make an infantry tank kind of template with this, this gives a 25% bonus for attacking forts. That, along with the Fortress Buster trait, which I believe is a 15% bonus, that'll end up giving you about a 40% attack bonus if you put these in a fortress kind of breaking template. So these things are absolutely incredible for that. The bad side of them is that they are 100 production cost. A light tank is 10. You can make 10 light tanks for every super heavy. One of these are 13. You can make about 7 or 8, I would say, probably, well, actually no, 6 or 7 medium tanks for every super heavy. And then for heavy tanks itself, you can probably make about 3.5 for every single super heavy tank. So they're obviously extremely expensive. In fact, if you make a 40 width division of these, it will require a ridiculously high amount of tanks, and I guarantee you won't be able to pop more than 1, maybe 2 if you're lucky, of these divisions out by the time you research them and all that, by the time the game is over if you're playing multiplayer. The only time you should really use these is for a kind of Space Marine template. You should never try to make a full 20 or 40 width division like this, and they should only be used to attack forts that you're trying to break through. Then finally, we have the modern tank. The modern tank has a good speed at 10 kilometers per hour. It's about the speed of a medium tank. It has really good armor at 130. The piercing is 131, which is really good as well. And then the soft attack is 40. Breakthrough is 84. So the production is alright on these. They're about twice as much as a medium tank. Well, not even really twice as much. Yeah, they actually are twice as much, but they're a little bit under a heavy tank. So it's like producing slightly less than a heavy tank. So the cons are they're still very expensive because they also require chrome. But again, these are really good just about all around. That's the only con to them. They're expensive. So other than that, there are no bad situations where you could use a modern tank. Now, the only time you should use these kind of tanks is attacking other tank divisions, infantry with anti-tank guns. These are pretty much all around able to attack everything. The only time you shouldn't use them is for naval invasions. This would be a horrible idea to try to naval invade with a modern tank division. So, before we get into the next part, remember, light tanks, they are good for fighting infantry without anti-tank guns and for getting breakthroughs, causing overruns if you have CAS and air superiority. Medium tanks are really good for pushing through enemy divisions, attacking other tanks, and basically causing encirclements. Heavy tanks are good for just straight up pushing through a front line, causing damage to forts, things like that. Super heavy tanks are great for attacking forts, but really shouldn't be done really anything outside of that, honestly. And then modern tanks are good for just about all around. However, they do not get the bonuses that I know of for attacking forts. Now, we're going to talk about those variant things I was talking about and a little trick on how to pierce other tanks with them. So first off, the SPAA. On all divisions, it is exactly the same setup and same task. The SPAA is pretty much used in divisions to the point where if the enemy has an air superiority bonus or they don't have air superiority and they're just in general using CAS and it's kind of tied, you need SPAA. Enemy air superiority bonuses can actually range up to giving a 50% penalty to you if they go down superior firepower and they have air superiority. It is, I guaranteed, going to massively affect you. Your division strength will be cut down to half if they actually max out superior firepower doctrine, so you need self-propelled AA. They also shoot down CAS, but not fighters. Then for the self-propelled artillery, they're pretty much about the same idea as the tank, except they can't really break through any other tanks. They have 5 piercing compared to a regular tank's 61 piercing, which should give you an idea. So these things should only ever be used against infantry divisions. They're mainly there to increase the soft attack of your divisions to cause more damage and break through enemy infantry divisions. But if you're going to be using these, I would use these more often than the tanks, unless the enemy has anti-tank guns, in which case you might want to move on to a heavy tank. Then finally, we have the tank destroyer variant, that's a little bit of a trick I was talking about. Now, tank destroyers are made to pierce one level under them or one level to the right. So it's kind of complicated about it, but I'm going to show you guys very simply how to do it. So, as we can see here, we have a light 3 tank destroyer. It can pierce, as you can see, 77 piercing, and the armor of a light tank 3, which is under it, 30. Then if we look at a medium 1, which is the only situation where this is slightly different, the armor is 60, but the piercing is still 77. Even though it's not directly to the right of that tank, it still kind of is on the same level. So then we're going to look at a tank destroyer 2. Now a medium 1 tank destroyer, I should rephrase that, can pierce one level under and one level to the right. Now because there's nothing to the right of it, as you can see, our piercing is 88, but the armor of a heavy tank 2 is 110. So it can't pierce it, but it can, however, pierce 80 armor with 88 piercing for the next level down. Then if we look at a medium 2, it can pierce a heavy, 110 piercing, 110 armor. I'm sure you get the idea. So that's kind of the way tank destroyers work. They can pierce one level to the right or one level under them. Now, obviously, if something is to the right, it can pierce anything to the left, obviously. So, for example, this, we'll just use this one for an example here really quick. This 88 piercing can obviously pierce a light tank that only has 30 armor or, 15 armor. A heavy tank destroyer can obviously, with 140 piercing, break through an 80 armor. So just remember that whatever's to the right can pierce anything to the left in terms of tank destroyers, but if it's to the left, it has to either be on the same row to the right or under it. Anyway guys, thank you so much for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed it. I will see you guys next time. Stay awesome.